We're ready to get started. So welcome to this Navigate webinar on NSF's Safe and Inclusive Work Environment Plans. Before we begin, there's a few housekeeping items. Please be sure that your microphone is muted and your video is off. Please use the chat function to ask questions during the presentation. We'll do our best to address the questions as they come up. More complex questions, though, we may hold until the end so we can get through the material. And then a note that the webinar recording and the slides will be available on the Navigate Webinars Past Sessions page a few days after the webinar. So in a few days, you'll have access to that from the web page. Great. So let's get started. Today's agenda, we'll talk through the background of the policy, the NSF policy, our university's implementation of this policy, roles and responsibilities of the PI, project team, unit, RAs, and we'll also provide you with some resources for references and then discuss any questions or thoughts for the future about this requirement and others like it. So the presenters today is myself. So I'm Becky O'Brien. I'm Director of Research Administration here at the School of Information. And I have been at the university for about 22 years. And I'll let Pat introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Pat Turnbull. I am the Director of Research Administration at the Dearborn campus. I've been with the university for 26 years, I think, since 1996. And I guess I am going to get us started with some background information about this policy and NSF's, where this policy came from, why NSF has created it, and then I'll turn it over to Becky to talk about how the university is going to address the policy. So, so the underlying principle of what we're talking about today is that NSF wants everyone who's engaged in science, wherever that science is being conducted, to have a safe working environment that's harassment-free and inclusive for all. And so to ensure that this principle is implemented in all NSF-funded projects, they started out by issuing in February of 2018 important notice number 144. And in this notice, they stated that NSF will not tolerate harassment of any kind wherever NSF-funded science and education are being conducted, and that PIs and co-PIs and grant personnel are considered to be in positions of trust, and therefore they are expected to act in a responsible and accountable manner at all times during the performance of the project activities. Then later that year in October, their next step was to add a new award term and condition that required grantee organizations to report findings of any type of harassment regarding PIs or grant personnel, and to report any administrative action toward a PI or co-PI related to harassment findings or investigations. And in those terms and conditions, they make it clear that NSF can take any action that they deem necessary to protect the safety of all grant personnel. And that includes the substitution or removal of a PI or co-PI, reduction of the award amount, and even to suspend or terminate the award if they feel that that is required. Then in February of 2019, they added language to the PAPG section on workshops and conferences that requires proposers to have a policy or a code of conduct in place that addresses sexual harassment, other forms of harassment or sexual assault, and a clear process for reporting those violations. And then, of course, in January of this year, they added the requirement that institutions must certify that if the organization must certify that there's a plan in place to address abusive or inappropriate behavior if there's going to be off-site or campus or off-campus work done. And this slide is a very condensed summary of how we got to where we are today. So I recommend that everybody go and when the slides are available to you and maybe click on these the links in the slide to get a deeper understanding of the background. And also at the bottom of this slide, we have a link to an NSF listening session where Jean Feldman from the NSF Policy Office is going to talk about this exact thing, the background of how we got here, and her discussion on that starts at the 3-minute mark. So let's dive into this requirement where organizations must certify that a safe and inclusive work environment plan is in place. And your first question might be, when is this needed? And NSF, of course, has provided a really specific definition for situations when we have to have these plans. And for the purposes of this requirement, off-campus or off-site research is defined as data, information, or samples being collected off-campus or off-site, such as fieldwork and research activities on vessels and aircraft. So if it's, so there are a lot of situations that it doesn't necessarily apply, but if research work is being done anywhere off-site or off-campus, you need to have this plan created. And note that it's the AOR, the authorized organizational representative, is certifying at the time of submission that the plan exists, but they're not certifying that there's this blanket plan. So each proposal has to have a project specific plan, which the project team needs to create. And then the unit approver is going to attest that this plan exists. So that means that ORSP is not reviewing the plan, but they will be certifying based on the unit attestation. So that really puts the onus on the unit to ensure that this plan is in place. And I'm sure that that means the unit approvers are going to want to see it before they approve the path, but we'll discuss that in a little more detail as we go through the presentation. Next slide. So NSF's requirements for the plan submission. One thing we want to point out is that the biological sciences and geosciences directorates are conducting pilots where this plan, their requirements for the plan are slightly different, but their plan, what they're requiring is submitted as part of the proposal. And it's considered in the review process. And Becky will talk about that in a little more detail when we get there. But it's just something to keep in mind because we are thinking that this may become the standard. Probably that's why they're conducting this pilot. But for all other directorates at this time, the plan does not have to be included in the proposal. It's not submitted in the proposal. You don't need to upload it into research.gov, but it does need to be created at the time of submission. And that is what ORSP is going to be certifying. And at the end of the presentation, we have a resources slide. And in that slide, we have a link to the FAQs for the pilot program in bio and geo that details their requirements. So how does this align with U of M policies? I'm sure that you are all likely aware of the evolution over the past few years of our university's policies related to workplace harassment and relationships between supervisor, employee, and with students. And NSF's new policy is kind of a way of connecting the dots to how those principles can and should carry over into off-site or off-campus activities. So obviously the goal of a safe and inclusive scientific environment requires a community effort, and U of M and NSF both recognize and are working toward these principles. And we have, again, some links on this slide that once they're available to you, you can follow the links and review those on your own. Okay, so implementation. Now that we know a little bit more about the NSF policy and where it came from, why it exists, and where they're trying to go with it, I am going to turn it over to Becky to talk about how U of M will be addressing the policy.
Great, thanks, Pat. So ORSP has created a U of M plan template, which you likely have seen, at least in some of the material from ORSP and on the website, if you've looked there. For the plan, so project teams are required to use this template for drafting their project plan. It pulls together the relevant U of M policies, about harassment and all that stuff. You're not, creating this out of whole cloth. It's within the university environment. So there's a lot of those U of M policies that are pulled into this document. The project team fills out the sections related to specifics of the project. So we'll look at those and talk a little bit more about those in the next few slides. And then the PI must sign and date agreeing to disseminate the plan to individuals prior to them starting off work, should the award come through. So in the plan, so it's not really, as Pat had said, it's not really a new concept at U of M. Again, the plan has links and references to existing U of M policies. This plan is just explicitly calling out these policies and making it clear how they will be followed in the specific off-campus, off-site situation described in the plan. It's not just an assurance to NSF, but an assurance to all U of M folks involved in the off-campus, off-site research that there are protections in place and a plan to protect their safety and health. The plan must include some information about how abuse and unwelcome conduct off-site will be addressed. The template also has other sections to complete, which covers the required topics, such as identifying steps to nurture an inclusive environment, minimizing singular points of contact for folks who are off-site, describing the field setting and unique challenges for the specific project, addressing special circumstances of the offsite environment, and then describing a plan for incident reporting. And as Pat had alluded to before, there's with the NSF Bio and Geo directorates, some of the solicitations require that a safe and inclusive work environment plan be submitted to NSF. There's some bits that are a little bit different and specified in the solicitation about what they want submitted directly. So the plan is limited to 2 pages total. And if you've taken a look at the template, the U of M template, you'll notice that the template starts at 5 pages, which means that if you're submitting to the BioGeo solicitation where it requires the submission to NSF, you're going to be cutting down a lot of the orientation text from U of M and really trying to focus on hitting the required information for the specific project. So for the bio and geo plans, looking at some of the solicitations that they had for examples, really is that description of the field site and unique challenges, steps that you'll take to nurture the inclusive environment, the communication process, again, minimizing singular points of contact, and mechanisms for reporting and responding to and resolving issues of harassment if they arise. So the BioGeo is a little bit different. That 2-page is much more condensed, and so that's a little bit different. And again, something to think about as we go forward, if this is something that NSF moves beyond or expands the pilot. There have been a few updates into ERPM to implement this policy at U of M. So as Pat stated earlier, the project team creates the plan, the unit attests to the plan, and ORSP gives their okay or certifies that the plan exists based on the unit attestation. So here you can see a screenshot of the PAF update, which when triggered adds an attestation for the admin home that states that the safe and inclusive work environment plan has been prepared. So you might be wondering, how is the attestation triggered? So in ERPM, when NSF is selected as the director prime sponsor in question 1.7, and either you have off-campus research selected for question 1.8 in the proposal type or class code, and or you have yes selected in question 4.4, which is about will U of M employees work off U of M property. So for collaborative proposals from multiple organizations, we just wanted to note, so if only the lead institution needs to certify to NSF, but it's still important to ask the lead, if you're not the lead, to share the plan, because your unit approver will still be asked to attest within the path, attest that the plan exists at proposal time. And also your project team would be required to follow that plan if the project is awarded. And so knowing what's in the plan and being a part of it can help make sure that it is actually something that is followable by the project team in our part. So one other thing to note is that there is now in the ERPM updates, there's also now a system validation that requires if you answer yes to off-campus research in question 1.8, that you must also answer, if you answer off-campus research to question 1.8, you must also answer yes to question 4.4, will U of M employees be working off campus? It makes sense, you know, if there is off-campus activity, then U of M employees would be working off campus if you meet that class code type. So there is a system validation now that requires those two things to be answered together. Okay, so highlights of the U of M implementation. So again, the PI project team creates the plan, the unit attests to the plan, ORSP certifies the plan based on unit attestation. And then if awarded, the project team should follow the plan and monitor and modify as necessary. And I know, you know, Pat and I, to hammer this home a little bit, we wanted to just pull out a couple of the main highlights. So the plan, again, is not submitted to NSF unless, again, specifically required by the solicitation, which right now is just some solicitations within the GeoBio directorates. ORSP does not require the plan to be uploaded into the PAF because they do not review the plan at all. Again, unless it's part of the overall proposal submitted package to NSF, as in the bio-geo directorate solicitations that require it. ORSP is relying on the unit attestation that the plan exists. So I'm going to hand this back over to Pat to talk a little bit about the PI unit and RA responsibilities.
Thanks, Becky. Okay, so as you've heard, there are several steps involved with this process. So we're going to take a look at who does what. So starting with the PI and project team responsibilities. At the time of proposal, the project team, it's on them to make the determination whether the activities trigger the need for the plan. Are there off-campus or off-site activities where U of M employees are going to be working? And if that is the case, then they need to use ORSP's template to prepare their plan. And the plan needs to be signed and dated by the PI. And we're recommending that each unit, you know, really give this some thought and define a clear business process for themselves to decide how these things are going to be documented and how the information is going to be collected, whether that be, you know, I mean, we feel like we would want to recommend that there be some kind of written procedure that people can follow. Maybe a checklist is needed, but you know, there are kind of a lot of pieces to this. So we strongly recommend that it's not something you just wait until it comes up and then figure it out. It's something that you kind of want to have a plan for the plan. And then the project team, PI and project team responsibilities at award time, they are going to be responsible for making sure that anybody who's working offsite or off campus receives a copy of the plan before they start that offsite work. And again, another reason that we're recommending that units really think about this and define a business process or have a step-by-step or checklist, something like that. You're probably also going to want to, we have some tips here, make sure that the team reviews the plan when the award comes in and updates it as needed. Are the locations the same as originally planned? Is the plan actually able to be implemented the way it was originally written? And then you should also have a process or a plan for documenting when people have been given the plan, who's received the plan, when did they receive the plan? And then, of course, they are going to need to be reminded to follow the plan. Okay, so the unit responsibilities. This is really the unit approvers. As I've said several times, we recommend that units should establish a business process, have that written down and clear for everyone so that when your administrators have to help faculty and PIs through this process, they know what they need to do. So unit approvers, as we said, are going to need to attest when they approve the PAF, they need to attest that the plan exists. So they're probably going to want to see the plan. And part of your unit process is probably going to be to have the plan included in the PAF documents. And again, this would not be proposal documents. This would just be in the internal PAF documents. As we've said before, ORSP is not going to be looking at the plan. They're just going to be certifying based on the unit attestation. So it's really up to the unit approver to ensure that a plan exists. And as Becky said, that goes for whether or not we are the lead. This is when NSF is the direct or the prime sponsor. Again, for the bio and geo proposals, the plan is going to be included as part of the proposal package. So it will be in research.gov with the final package. For those submissions, if they get awarded, there are going to be, you're going to need to document any changes that need to be addressed, any changes that need to be made to the plan or revisions. You're going to also need to document that. So again, whatever you determine that your internal process is going to be for your school or college or institute or campus, we recommend that it be clearly communicated up front. And if you don't know if your unit has a plan, then you should definitely ask. So finally, what are the research administrator's responsibilities? The RA might not be in the position to write the plan, but at the time of the proposal, you do need to make sure that you're letting your PI and project team know about this new requirement. They may not even be aware that this is a thing. So you need to call that out to them. Make sure that they use the university's template that ORSP has posted on their website. Make sure that, as Becky discussed, the specific components in the PAF are completed properly, that, you know, off-campus research is indicated, that that off-site locations are indicated. And also another big thing not to forget is that you're going to need to check the checkbox in research.gov to show NSF that off-site activities are taking place. So at award time, regardless of whether the plan was required as a part of the proposal or not, the project team is going to be required to follow the plan. So whether it's bio or geo, where the plan was required to be part of the proposal, or not one of those directorates and the plan was just required to exist, basically, we're still required to follow the plan in any case. So the the RA is going to need to guide the PI and project team to review the plan and determine if it needs to be revised at all, to document or record the new plan in e-research if that's required. I mean, if it's for geo or bio, the new plan is going to need to be documented because it is part of the proposal. If it was not required as part of the proposal, again, this is going to be sort of your unit process to determine how, when, where you record this. And in our little tips box there, we're suggesting that you put this in the unit terms and conditions and also upload it into the unit documents. And this is not something that is going to be carried over from the PAF. So like, this is something that you are going to have to, like, I guess it's a manual process to make sure that this gets done. And the plan, again, will need to be distributed to anyone working off-site before they start that off-site work. I think I got everything on here. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Becky.
Thanks, Pat. So just to kind of reiterate again, some of the key takeaways for RAs. So at proposal time, explicitly asking if any off-campus, off-site research is planned, asking the PI project team, orienting the PI project team to the new requirements and policies, sharing the template with them. And at award setup and management time, remind the PI project team of the plan and their responsibilities. You can do that, definitely at award setup time. And then periodically, maybe, thinking about if you have, adding as an agenda item in some kind of annual check-in or other regular checkpoint that you do with your PI project teams. And again, we want to point out that unlike, IRB or M-Inform, export controls, data management plans, et cetera, that are all monitored by compliance units or specifically provided to and approved by NSF, there's no external monitoring at this time for these plans. And there's a good faith expectation that the project team will implement and follow the plan. So I know we've been hammering on that, but I think it is a little bit different in that way from a lot of the other things that we've done or are doing. And so we want to make sure that that is something, that people are aware of. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about resources. So as Pat had talked about before, we've got some information here, links to the BioGeo Safe and Inclusive Work Environments virtual office hour. So that is a good resource to check out to get some information. Now it's again a bit more specific about BioGeo, but there's some good information generally in there, as well as the FAQs, again related directly to BioGeo, but there's some good general information in there as well. And then for additional NSF and U of M resources, you can see the template, the link to the template here. And then we wanted to talk a little bit with you all about, so we're doing this webinar. It's really early on in terms of this requirement and a lot of things that we're still trying to figure out, right? And so some of the things that we, as we were discussing and pulling this material together, some of the things we were thinking about, is that idea of the collaboration, working with other institutions. So what should be the best practices as we gain more experience developing a plan and carrying out a plan across multiple institutions? Is there a potential expansion beyond the BioGeo pilot for this proposed requirement? So that is, yet to be determined. We'll see how that goes. Reporting, if this becomes an agency-wide requirement, what type of reporting or monitoring might be required? And then also other federal agencies have started having, some variations of these policies. So we've got a link in here that has some of that information. There's certain aspects, certain parts of Department of Energy that has some really specific things. NIH is a little bit where NSF was previously, where they're saying, it's important to have, your policies in place, but they're not requiring a plan yet, but will they? So this is a sort of a trending area. So it'll be interesting to see. So there's a link there to some a good document from Northwestern, kind of breaking out into different sections, some of those other current federal policies. One thing is, so this is going to be kind of an ongoing conversation because again, this is new and it's only some things actually being submitted to NSF, in the BioGeo directorates. And, it just started in January. So even the ones that are submitted to NSF, there hasn't been enough time to get really feedback on those yet. So there's still a lot to be determined around this or discovered around this new requirement. What exactly do they mean? Further clarification from NSF, changes, additions of other sponsors doing this sort of thing. One of the things I wanted to mention was that, put a little plug in for the RA forum on Slack as a good venue to continue the conversation, ask questions, share experiences, because I think it's going to be, we're all going to be in this a little bit of a we're not sure. What are we doing the right thing? Are we hitting the right pieces? Are there things we're not thinking about? You know, we're all in this discovery phase together.